There are times that we need to call the server to validate a given value. For example, here we want to call the server to see if this username is taken or not. So let's go ahead and implement a custom validator. So here, back in our username validators class, I'm going to add another static method. So static, let's call this should be unique. Now, just like the other validator function, this function should take a parameter of type abstract control. So control of type abstract control. Now the return type should be validation errors or null. All right, now to implement this method, we don't want to call the server yet because we haven't looked at connecting to the HTTP services in Angular. So let's make it simple and simulate a call to the server. I want to implement a simple rule. If the username is Mosh, we can assume it's taken. Otherwise, the username is unique. So here's a very simple implementation. If control.value equals Mosh, now we need to return a validation errors object. So return an object. The key is the name of our error, so should be unique. And the value, we can use true. Now, otherwise, we return null. So this is a very simple implementation, right? But what should we do to simulate the call to the server? Well, calling the server is what we classify as an asynchronous operation. What is an asynchronous operation? Well, the classic definition is a little bit too complicated. So let me explain it in practical terms. When we call the server, there's going to be a bit of delay, right? That delay may be half a second, it might be 3 seconds, or it might be 20 seconds, depending on the connection speed, right? In situations like that, the process that is executing our code doesn't want to block while waiting for the result coming back from the server. Because if that process blocks, the user cannot interact with the browser. So that process is going to call the server behind the scene, and when the result is ready, it's going to display to the user. Okay? So this is what we call an asynchronous operation. Asynchronous means non-blocking. So once again, the process that executes the code doesn't block while waiting. Now, calling the server is not the only asynchronous operation in JavaScript. Another example of an asynchronous operation is the set timeout function that you've probably seen before. So set timeout. Now here, as the first argument, we need to pass a callback function. So I'm going to add a function here. So this is the arrow function syntax that you learned about in the section about TypeScript. This represents a function with no parameters. And here's the body of that function. So here, let's simply log something on the console. Okay. We want this function to be executed after, let's say, 2000 milliseconds or 2 seconds. So this is an asynchronous operation because we don't want the process to block while waiting for 2 seconds. So set timeout as well as set interval in JavaScript and TypeScript are examples of asynchronous operations. We can use this to simulate a call to the server. So I'm going to move this code here inside our callback function like this. Very easy, right? Now look, we have a compilation error here. A function whose declared type is neither void nor any must return a value. The issue we have in this code is that these values we're returning here are not returned from our validator function. They're returned from the callback function that we pass to the set timeout function. Okay? In other words, we define this method here should be unique, and we set the return type of this method to validation errors or null. But in this method, we are not returning any values. We're simply calling the set timeout function. If you want to get rid of this compilation error, we need to return something here. Return null. Now the compilation error is gone. However, we cannot use this validator function inside our component because this function will always return null, which means no errors. So the issue we have here is that we're dealing with an asynchronous operation. When we're building a validator that involves an asynchronous operation, we need to use a different signature for our validator function. And that's the topic for the next lecture.